Hello, this video is set up to introduce proteins as one of the major biomolecules we'll talk about this chapter. If you remember this section of the diagram that was used in the biomolecules video, proteins are of course the polymer. The monomer for them are amino acids. Those are the building blocks that are making up the proteins. We talked a little bit about some of the functions of proteins. I'll get into some of that more in this video in more detail, but we'll look at things that provide structure, immunity, talks about aid in muscle movement. Another thing that's big with proteins are enzymes, which we'll get into a little bit. As far as sources go, there's lots of ways to get these, but we'll look at a few of them down here. Get this one out of our way. Of course, the thing that everybody thinks of right away when it comes to protein are things like beef and chicken, but there's lots of other sources. You can get them from eggs, fish. There are some grains that actually have decent amounts of protein. Obviously, beans are good sources, so things like soybeans, kidney beans, those kinds of things. Peas, of course, are peanuts are a good source of protein. Peas, really, not so much. And then there's a few in here that I like that weren't included in the other image. So you have a lot of your dairy products like cheeses, and then they show other nuts here, things like walnuts and things like that, as good sources of protein. So it's good to just have an idea of a few different sources. So if I asked you, what would be an example of a food that would contain this biomolecule, that's what you're looking for. Keep in mind, these things don't include just exclusively protein. For example, a lot of nuts contain healthy fats. Same thing with eggs. And actually most of the things on our list here. So just because something contains protein doesn't mean it contains that exclusively. There are many food options that will contain two or more biomolecules. But as long as what you mentioned has protein in it, then that's fine as far as what I'm looking for that kind of thing. So to talk about the amino acids in a little bit more detail, for starters, there are a few different kinds of amino acids. When it comes to people, there are what are called essential and then non-essential amino acids. The reason that some of these are considered essential is that you have to get them from your diet. You might remember some of these things from the codon chart when we were doing the chapter on DNA and talking about protein synthesis. Because remember, proteins are made up of amino acids. The idea behind the essential ones is that you need to get these from your diet. These aren't things your body can make. So one of the things I mentioned a little bit in some of the classes is that when you eat, say, a steak, your body isn't made out of cow proteins. Your body's made out of particular proteins that are unique to you. So you break down that steak into the amino acids that compose it, and then your body rebuilds the proteins that you need. So for example, something like histidine, you need to get that from the food that you're eating, but some other things, like for example glutamine, your body can actually build that amino acid from some of the other things in your diet. But any of the essential ones are things that you have to eat directly. Your body can't make them on its own. Just to give you an idea of the structure for some of these, and since this is not a biochemistry class, you don't have to go through and memorize all of these structures. But there are 22 important amino acids when it comes to people. Again, I'll make this a little bigger so you can see it. Many of these things are things off of your codon chart. So you should recognize, things like glycine. We talked about threonine, cysteine, rather. So the two that are new here are the two on this side. These were not in your codon chart. Those are things that are essential for humans, but not necessarily for other organisms. So a lot of the things on the inside portion of this chart are different amino acids that everything needs. To be honest with you, we're not going to get into this in extreme detail. You should just be aware of the fact that there's 22 essential amino acids that people require. That's good enough to know. And then the final thing, I like this just because it gives you an example of what some of these things are used for. This one breaks down where some of the amino acids are used in the body. So just to give you a few ideas, your skin, in this one, lysine, proline, and cysteine, those are all important for your skin. It talks about a few other things, like there's multiple ones that are important for your blood. So the tryptophan that you get on Thanksgiving from the turkey, it's important for your blood. Histidine, the serine, lots of things that are important for different functions in different parts of your body. They always talk about taurine being important for brain function. They also link glutamine to that one as well. You can see there are actually quite a few that are important for brain function up there, just to keep things healthy. Are these things I'm going to ask you specifically? Absolutely not. Hey, where is glutamine used inside the body? You're not going to be asked questions like that. But I think this just gives you an idea of why these things are important and why we need such a variety of them, because the different parts of the body require different amino acids in order for everything to function optimally. The last thing to talk about is a special group of proteins that are called enzymes. Enzymes are used to either build products for the body or break down other products for the body. These are referred to either as anabolic or catabolic enzymes. So something that's anabolic is building, something that's catabolic is taking something apart. I'll write that stuff down for you in a minute at the end here, but I just want to give you an example of each first. If we're looking at this particular example, we've got to follow the numbers here to see how this progresses. So we've got the first step, second, and then third. This guy is our enzyme. You can see the enzyme has a particular shape. That shape is unique to the molecule that it's binding with. One of the things we'll talk about in the carbohydrate video is maltose. Maltose is an example of a simple carbohydrate. It's called a disaccharide because there are two different carbon rings that are bonded together. This enzyme that's shown in this example is a catabolic enzyme because it's breaking things down. So you can see the maltose has the same shape as the indent in the enzyme. The maltose then binds with the enzyme in the second step at what's called the active site. And this particular enzyme breaks down the maltose into two glucose molecules. So maltose is actually just two glucoses that are bonded together. This particular enzyme is breaking it down, which makes it catabolic. It's breaking this maltose molecule down into two smaller molecules, two glucose molecules. So that's an example of a catabolic reaction. An anabolic reaction is when you're building things. So here we have the opposite. You still have the enzyme, and you can see that the active site on here is a unique shape to match up with the products that it's using. These are referred to as the substrate. So this one kind of is a circular shape, this one is more of a pointed shape. They then fit in the enzyme. When they fit together there, the enzyme bonds them together. So we've got two products that are then combined into one single product, and then here at the end it's released from the enzyme, and it says up here this process can be repeated. That's important. Enzymes can be used over and over and over again, so your body is constantly creating them, but they can be used more than once. It's not like it's a one-time deal. So the two major categories, just so you guys have this written down, there are anabolic enzymes. So these are building things. And then there's catabolic. So that's an I. And these are breaking things down. I think the names kind of make things easier. Think of something that's anabolic. Someone's taking anabolic steroids right there, getting bigger. And then catabolism generally happens to you if you're in like a situation where you don't have enough food or enough to eat. Your body's then going to start breaking down like your muscle mass and things like that, and using that for energy. So that's when the enzymes are then breaking things apart. Another good example of this is catabolic reactions happen during digestion. While you're consuming food, your body breaks them down into their basic parts, and then things get rebuilt based on the individual molecules that your body needs. So I hope this makes for a decent introduction for you for proteins. Remember, the next video will be carbohydrates, where we get into some of the specifics of how those work in more detail. Make sure you answer the questions at the end of this video. I appreciate you watching, and I'll see you in class.